He thinks it's just another quiet evening argument, the kind that starts small and ends nowhere. She sighs, looks away and says softly, "It's fine. I just wish you cared the way you used to." Her voice doesn't accuse, yet his chest tightens. By the time he speaks, he's already defending himself against something he can't see. That's how the game works. Not through deception, but through precision. It's not that women are manipulative. It's that men keep mistaking emotional fluency for honesty. Control doesn't arrive loudly. It whispers through care. Number 1. The emotional mirror. He raises his voice, not in anger, but in logic. He's explaining calmly why what happened wasn't a big deal. Facts, sequence, reasoning, everything lines up neatly. She listens, eyes still, and when he's done, she simply says, "I just don't feel safe when you talk like this." The air shifts. His logic collapses. He's no longer defending truth. He's defending tone. That's the power of the emotional mirror. It turns argument into reflection. He stops seeing reality as it is and starts seeing himself through her reaction. Women don't use this consciously. Emotional reflection is their native language. From childhood, girls learn to connect through empathy, to sense, absorb, and respond. Boys learn to fix, to explain, to contain. When these worlds collide, her emotional calibration feels like intuition, while his logical framing feels like dismissal. Each believes they're right. Each experiences the other as unreachable. Yet beneath that tension lies biology. Her brain built for connection, his for problem solving. Neuroscience calls it emotional contagion. Mirror neurons replicate the feelings we witness. When she displays sadness, discomfort, or fear, his nervous system mirrors it. He feels her tension and mistakes it for moral signal. He interprets her emotion as evidence that he's done something wrong. The moment empathy becomes guilt, he's been captured, not by deceit, but by design. She doesn't demand obedience, she invites correction. "It's not what you said," she whispers, "it's how you said it." The phrase dismantles him because it's unmeasurable. Tone cannot be disproven. Every defense sounds defensive. Every explanation deepens her hurt. He caves, not to win her back, but to end the emotional discomfort in his own body. That's how emotional mirroring turns power into peacekeeping. Over time, this conditioning rewires his instincts. He learns that emotional stability depends on her approval. When she's calm, he's worthy. When she's upset, he's failing. What began as empathy becomes servitude dressed as love. He loses authority not because she took it, but because he surrendered it, to harmony, to her perception, to the illusion that peace equals progress. Number 2. The guilt loop. It starts quietly, never as accusation. She exhales after an argument, looks down and says, "I just feel like I'm never enough for you." The words disarm him instantly. There's no attack to block, only pain to soothe. He steps forward, softens his tone, reaches to comfort her. In that moment, something irreversible happens. The emotional frame flips. She's no longer accountable for what she said. He's accountable for how she feels. That is the birth of the guilt loop, a system where empathy becomes obedience. The loop feeds on reflex, not reason. He doesn't think, he repairs. It feels moral, almost sacred to protect her from discomfort. But each time he takes ownership of emotions he didn't cause, he trains his brain to equate guilt with love. The next time she sighs, hesitates, or retreats into silence, his nervous system activates automatically. Her unease becomes his fault. Her calm becomes his prize. That's how guilt transforms from conscience into conditioning. Neuroscience explains this as the empathy relief cycle. When she expresses pain, her brain releases oxytocin. When he reassures her, his brain releases serotonin. They both feel rewarded, she for being comforted, he for being needed. But these small chemical victories accumulate into emotional debt. Soon, he's apologizing preemptively, editing his opinions before speaking, reading her expressions like weather forecasts. He's not being kind, he's managing volatility. What makes guilt powerful is its subtlety. It never says, "You're wrong." It says, "You're disappointing me." And for the man who defines worth through service, that's unbearable. Guilt doesn't demand compliance, it teaches self-censorship. He stops setting boundaries because boundaries feel like betrayal. He confuses love with repair, affection with atonement. Over time, his peace depends on her discontent. He only feels whole when she feels healed. The tragedy of the guilt loop isn't that she manipulates him, it's that he volunteers. He mistakes his empathy for virtue, not realizing it's been weaponized by repetition. The way out isn't harder logic, it's emotional neutrality. Guilt only governs those who believe it defines goodness. When he learns to sit in the discomfort of her unhappiness without surrendering his integrity, the spell breaks. Guilt loses power the moment it stops buying love. Number 3. The scarcity script. It begins with distance so subtle he can't tell if it's real. She used to text good morning, now it's mid-afternoon replies. Her tone hasn't soured, it's cooled. Nothing's wrong, but something's missing. When he asks, she says, "I've just been busy." The rational part of him believes her. The emotional part panics. That tension is exactly what feeds the scarcity script. A pattern where absence replaces affection and uncertainty becomes the new intimacy. In behavioral psychology, this is intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that hooks gamblers. When a reward is unpredictable, the brain releases more dopamine than when it's guaranteed. Every unanswered text, every delayed response, every withheld smile triggers anticipation, not despair. He starts living for the next hit of warmth. Her approval becomes his slot machine, and every small return of attention feels like jackpot. He calls this love, but it's addiction, measured in relief, not joy. What makes this script potent is that it often operates unconsciously. She's not always playing a game, she's protecting her leverage. When she senses him becoming too secure, she withdraws slightly, not to hurt him, but to test whether she still matters. It's emotional calibration disguised as space. He, meanwhile, mistakes withdrawal for punishment and tries harder. Longer texts, deeper compliments, bigger gestures. He's proving devotion to regain stability. She feels that surge of reassurance, relaxes, and the pattern resets. Over time, his self-worth becomes indexed to her rhythm. When she's engaged, he thrives. When she retreats, he shrinks. This conditioning erodes masculine independence more effectively than control ever could. He learns to interpret distance as danger, silence as failure, busyness as rejection. His nervous system stops operating from strength and starts reacting to scarcity. The cruel paradox is that predictability feels dull to her, and instability feels alive to him. Both are now addicted to imbalance. She feels powerful in withholding, he feels purposeful in chasing. The relationship becomes a cycle of emotional inflation, both rising on the tension, both crashing when calm returns. The antidote is brutal clarity. Affection that disappears was never affection. It was leverage. True connection doesn't fluctuate with attention. It deepens with presence. Once he learns to stop rewarding inconsistency with pursuit, the scarcity script ends, not by confrontation, but by starvation. A game without a player cannot exist. Number 4. The rewrite reflex. He remembers the conversation clearly. She was late, he asked why, and the tension grew from there. But when it comes up days later, the story has mutated. Now he was cold, dismissive, raising his voice. He searches his memory for those details. They aren't there. Still, he hesitates. Her certainty is so complete it makes him question his own mind. That's the rewrite reflex, the moment emotional narrative quietly replaces factual history and perception becomes truth. Women rarely do this maliciously. Emotional memory functions differently from factual recall. When a woman feels hurt, her brain reconstructs events in alignment with that feeling. The pain becomes the filter through which everything is reorganized. It's not deceit. It's emotional coherence. If she felt dismissed, the story must now include dismissal because the emotion requires context. The revised memory justifies the feeling, and once it feels true, it is true to her nervous system. Men, wired for linear, recall, try to correct it. That's not what I said. You're twisting this. I didn't raise my voice. Each logical defense fails not because it's wrong, but because it doesn't address the emotional law governing her recollection. He's arguing data. She's defending meaning. The more he insists on facts, the more she feels invalidated. The more she feels invalidated, the more certain her version becomes. What began as miscommunication transforms into moral conflict. In psychology, this dynamic is called emotional encoding bias, the tendency to remember events in ways that sustain identity. When emotion and logic collide, emotion always wins, because the body's need for narrative harmony overrides accuracy. She's not fighting him, she's protecting her sense of reality. But he experiences it as manipulation, because it destabilizes the ground truth on which his integrity rests. Over time, he learns that defending memory is pointless. He avoids disagreement altogether. Silence replaces correction, passivity replaces presence. This, ironically, confirms her rewritten version. His quiet becomes proof of guilt. The relationship decays under the weight of false reconciliation. The only counter to the rewrite reflex is emotional detachment from the need to be right. Reality doesn't require validation to exist. When he simply states, "That's not how I remember it," and refuses to chase the argument, he reclaims his internal compass. Number 5. The comparison game. It starts innocently enough. She mentions how thoughtful her co-worker is, how her friend's husband plans surprise dates, or how some actor just gets women. It doesn't sound like criticism, it sounds like conversation. But beneath those casual remarks lies one of the oldest psychological games in relationships: comparison. The words aren't meant to wound directly, they're meant to signal value, to remind him subtly that admiration is a currency she can spend elsewhere. This is not always conscious. Comparison operates as a survival mechanism, a way to measure security through external reference. For a woman, attraction is tied to perception of status, confidence, and social competence. When she compares, she's not merely evaluating him, she's reaffirming her own worth through his relative standing. In essence, she's asking, "If I chose you, what does that say about me?" When his energy dips or his direction blurs, these comparisons become a quiet audit of her investment. For him, each remark hits the nervous system like a test he didn't know he was taking. Jealousy and shame ignite, disguised as motivation. He starts adjusting, new clothes, more compliments, grand gestures, all designed to re-earn a position he never actually lost. But each adjustment confirms her power. The moment he reacts, she learns that his self-assurance depends on her approval. What began as an unconscious probe becomes a loop of emotional conditioning. The psychology behind this is triangulation, using a third reference point to control emotional equilibrium. In primitive tribal dynamics, competition signaled value. Modern relationships inherit that code. When a woman introduces another man into the conversation, she's not just invoking comparison, she's triggering scarcity. The message is silent but clear. I have options. And the male brain, shaped by millennia of rivalry, responds with submission disguised as effort. The danger isn't the comment, it's the compliance that follows. When he begins altering behavior to preempt comparison, he stops leading. His actions no longer express authenticity, they perform approval. Over time, she loses respect, not because he failed to meet the standard, but because he surrendered his frame to meet it. A man who competes for validation forfeits the gravity that first attracted her. The only antidote to the comparison game is indifference to contrast. When he remains unmoved, not cold but centered, he reclaims polarity. He doesn't need to defend his value against hypothetical men, because true confidence isn't reactive, it's quiet certainty. Comparison only manipulates those still uncertain of their worth. Once he stops competing, the game ends, not because she quits playing, but because it no longer works. Number 6. The chaos reward. It begins with a sudden shift. The day was calm until it wasn't. A casual remark turns sharp, her eyes narrow, her voice rises and the energy in the room thickens. He feels the surge of adrenaline before he can think. His pulse spikes, his chest tightens, and somewhere beneath the frustration there's a flicker of intensity that almost feels alive. That's the chaos reward, the hidden chemistry of emotional turbulence that both people mistake for passion. Human connection runs on chemistry, not conversation. When conflict erupts, the body floods with adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine, the same cocktail that powers attraction. The argument becomes a physiological stimulant, a spike of sensation that cuts through the dullness of routine. When she stirs the storm and he rises to meet it, their nervous systems synchronize through stress. The fight becomes foreplay, reconciliation becomes relief. What feels toxic is actually neurochemical bonding masquerading as intensity. She doesn't always do it intentionally. For many women, chaos is the language of closeness. If calm feels like distance, then tension feels like proof of connection. She might escalate to feel seen, to verify that she still matters. When he retreats, she provokes further, not to destroy peace, but to resurrect attention. He, unaware of this pattern, responds with frustration, then guilt, then renewed effort to calm things down. The cycle completes when peace returns. Temporary, earned, deceptive. Both feel satisfied, mistaking exhaustion for intimacy. Psychologically, this is the trauma-reward loop, a system where emotional spikes become addictive. Just as gamblers chase losses for the thrill of recovery, couples caught in chaos chase equilibrium through destruction. The body associates volatility with depth. Calm becomes intolerable because it lacks stimulation, and so they keep rebuilding the same fire just to feel its heat. For the man, the danger lies in normalization. He begins to equate emotional chaos with feminine vitality. A peaceful woman feels dull, a dramatic one feels alive. Without realizing it, he starts seeking the very instability that drains him. He tells himself he loves passionate women, when in truth he's addicted to adrenaline. His nervous system has mistaken danger for desire. The cure isn't avoidance, it's reconditioning. True masculine calm doesn't flee chaos, it refuses to feed it. When he learns to remain composed while she spirals, the pattern dies of starvation. Without reaction, there is no rush. Without the rush, there is no reward. What remains isn't boredom, it's clarity. And from clarity, real connection can finally begin. Number 7. The helplessness play. It doesn't begin with confrontation. It begins with softness. She sighs, looks at the broken cabinet or the unopened bill and says, "I just can't deal with this right now." Her tone isn't demanding. It's weary, almost childlike. Instinctively, he steps in. He fixes, organizes, plans, solves. She thanks him sincerely, and for a moment he feels masculine, needed, purposeful. But slowly a subtle pattern forms. The more helpless she appears, the more useful he feels. What starts as care becomes a quiet hierarchy of power disguised as tenderness. This is the helplessness play, a behavioral pattern that turns dependence into influence. It's not manipulation in the malicious sense, it's survival through softness. Many women learn early that direct assertion invites resistance, but vulnerability disarms it. Helplessness makes control look like grace. Each sigh, each "I don't know what to do," becomes a trigger for masculine duty. He mistakes it for love, because helping her feels like protecting something precious. The psychology behind it is ancient. In the male brain, distress signals from someone we care about activate the same circuits as physical danger. To not respond feels like moral failure. But when the dynamic repeats, she learns that small performances of incapacity yield results faster than confrontation. He learns that leadership means solving instead of teaching. Over time, both shrink, she into learned fragility, he into functional servitude. He doesn't notice the shift immediately. His decisions start running through her perceived limits. She wouldn't like that. She'd get stressed. He edits himself for her comfort, not her growth. She in turn becomes addicted to the feeling of being carried, not realizing that every rescue weakens the very strength she admired. This dynamic corrodes polarity. The protector becomes the parent. The partner becomes the child. Breaking the helplessness play requires withdrawing the emotional reward. A man must resist the urge to fix what she weaponizes as fragility, not with cruelty, but with quiet firmness. You'll figure it out. Real compassion empowers, false compassion enables. When he stops equating love with rescue, she's forced to rediscover capability, and he rediscovers respect. Helplessness loses its power when responsibility returns. The woman rises when the man refuses to carry what isn't his. That's the paradox of strength. Sometimes the truest form of care is stepping back, not stepping in. Every game has a winner in the moment and a loser over time. At first, these psychological maneuvers look harmless. Small exchanges of emotion for attention, vulnerability for control, guilt for closeness. But beneath the surface, Both people are trading authenticity for advantage. The woman loses the stability she secretly craves. The man loses the respect that once defined him. What remains is choreography, each reacting to the other, neither standing still long enough to be seen. For her, the cost hides behind temporary victories. The reassurance she extracts feels powerful, but it fades quickly. She becomes dependent on emotional movement to feel alive, needing conflict or confusion to maintain connection. The very tactics that once protected her begin to isolate her. No one can love someone who never stands still long enough to be known. Her emotional fluency turns into noise, drowning out the tenderness she's trying to express. For him, the cost is erosion. Slow, invisible, irreversible. Every apology made to preserve peace chips away at his authority. Every boundary softened to spare her feelings blurs his identity. Over years, the man who once led with conviction becomes cautious, careful, hesitant. He stops expressing truth to avoid reaction, and in that silence, he becomes unrecognizable, even to himself. The tragedy isn't that she broke him, it's that he consented through kindness. These games don't end through confrontation, they end through exhaustion. The relationship decays not because love disappears, but because the people playing it disappear. She no longer trusts his strength, he no longer believes in his voice. They're left with fragments of who they used to be, her validation addicted to his approval, his peace addicted to her calm. Both are enslaved to the emotional economy they built together. The real loss isn't the relationship, it's the self. Love without truth becomes performance, and performance without rest becomes madness. What they called passion was often panic. What they called care was control. And the moment he sees that clearly, everything changes. Not because he stops loving her, but because he finally understands the difference between love and captivity. The turning point isn't dramatic, it's quiet. One evening she withdraws again, the same tone, the same silence, the same script he's played 100 times, but this time he doesn't chase, he doesn't explain or fix, he simply notices. The silence stretches, heavy but clean. For the first time he feels the difference between peace and compliance. That moment, still grounded, unflinching, is the end of reactivity and the beginning of mastery. Men lose power not because women take it, but because they trade it for emotional stability. Reactivity is the currency of control. Every time he explains himself to be understood, argues to be right, or comforts to be forgiven, he reinforces the frame that his worth depends on her perception. Awareness breaks the transaction. Once he stops reacting, the entire emotional economy collapses. Control only exists where confusion thrives. Psychologically, this is detachment, not apathy, but sovereignty. Detachment means he no longer measures himself through her moods. It means he can hear accusation without absorbing it, see tears without drowning in them, and face silence without filling it with guilt. The shift is internal, from reactive participant to stable observer. His calm stops being strategy. It becomes identity. This composure doesn't make him cold. It makes him trustworthy. Paradoxically, when he stops bending to emotion, she begins to relax. The storms lose purpose when they no longer move him. His neutrality becomes her mirror, reflecting peace instead of panic. The very presence she once tested for weakness becomes the one she depends on for stability. This is polarity restored, not through dominance, but through stillness. He begins to speak differently, less often, more precisely. That's not mine to fix. I understand you feel that way. I care, but I disagree. These are not rejections, they are recalibrations. Each statement reinforces a new rule: love without surrender. In time, she adjusts, not because he demanded it, but because the emotional game no longer rewards her. Without reaction, there is no leverage. Without leverage, there is no control. Freedom in relationships doesn't come from changing her. It comes from mastering the self that keeps needing to respond. When he learns that silence is not threat, distance is not loss, and disagreement is not danger, he stops being programmable. That's when the games lose meaning, and love becomes something purer, something voluntary. The man who doesn't react isn't indifferent, he's free. Every game ends when one player refuses to keep playing. The power struggle between men and women isn't about dominance, it's about dependence. For too long, men have mistaken reaction for care, thinking that meeting every emotional fluctuation proves love. But love proven through surrender always rots into resentment. What began as devotion ends as depletion, because the man who constantly bends eventually breaks. The truth is simple. Women don't respect what they can fully control. The moment a man stops managing her emotions, he reclaims his own. Boundaries aren't walls, they're mirrors that teach both people where they end and the other begins. When he stops chasing harmony at the expense of self, he discovers something deeper than peace: clarity. No manipulation can survive where presence exists. No guilt works on the man who no longer fears withdrawal. No game continues once the rules are seen. The way out has always been the same. Not confrontation, not coldness, but awareness. See the pattern, and it dissolves. See yourself, and the game ends. In the end, what destroys men isn't women, it's blindness, and what restores them isn't power, it's perception. The man who learns to stay still in the storm becomes ungovernable, not because he resists her, but because he finally belongs to himself.